All right, welcome everyone. Thanks very much for joining us today. We really appreciate you giving up your valuable time to come and have a chat with us today. My name's Craig Peterson. I'm the Aviation Safety Advisor for CASA in Perth. Very lucky to be joined today by our guest speaker, Ian Warburton. And Ian was the race manager for the 2025 Outback Air Race. He's also a RAF pilot, recently retired after 55 years of service, and he's going to give us some of his experience and things that happened on the Outback Air Race this year, which is really of interest with the topic that we're talking about today. So I'm going to get our presentation going here, and we'll talk about what we're discussing today. So today, what we wanted to talk about is the planning requirements for destination and alternate aerodromes. We do these webinars and our in-person webinars, as seminars as well, just as an opportunity as aviators to pause and reflect on how we're doing things. And I think that's an important part of our process and how we keep ourselves safe. Because if you remember back to human factors studies, we know that safety is not set and forget. Our skills are perishable because we're humans. Things like, a bit of complacency comes into play. We start to drop our guard a little bit, and that's typically when aeroplanes can come back and bite us pretty hard. So these webinars, we like to sort of talk about things that are happening out there, have an honest look at how we're doing our flying, and look for things that may have crept into our flying that we think, I've maybe got a bit of complacency coming in there, or I haven't been giving that due consideration that I should be. So if you can walk away today with a couple of things where you think, that's something I might need to concentrate on a little bit more that I've let slip a bit, I think that's going to be a really good outcome for us. We're not here to teach you to be safe. We're doing a really good job of that so far. We're teaching you or reminding you to be vigilant and just make sure that you're doing everything up to the standard that you're happy with respect to your flying. So we don't sort of randomly pick these topics. We look at these, what's happening in the actual incident and accident database from the ATSB, Australian Transport Safety Bureau, and we concentrate on the things that are actually happening out there. Now, with our webinars, they're not as interactive as our in-person seminars where we can have a bit of a discussion, we can hear your thoughts, and we can get some good conversation going. But the plus side of the webinar is we can reach a much wider audience, and it's a lot more convenient for you to join us. So I certainly hope that you've found somewhere comfortable to join us. You've got a tea, coffee, or a beverage of your choice, and you're nice and comfortable and looking forward to the next hour or so. One of the things we do with our presentations is we partner with Credly. And what they do is they issue these digital badges. You can see it on the left-hand side of the screen there. So this one's for destination and alternate airfield planning. And the digital badges are sort of a symbol that, you're actively engaged in safety education, which is a really good thing as an aviator. I'm sure you'd agree. So we can give you this little digital badge. All you need to do to get your digital badge is stay till the end of the presentation. We've got your email address. We'll be dropping you an email with a link so that you can grab your little digital badge. What do we do with them? If you're not familiar with them, we can use them in things like signature blocks. You can put it into digital resumes, and you can also put it on your social media feeds as well. If you stayed in the presentation, you'll be getting an email from us regarding that. So airfield planning for both our destination and our alternates. Why are we talking about it? Well, as I mentioned, if we look at the accident incident data from the ATSB, it's pretty clear. We still see types of accidents reflected in that data where people have either not planned at all for their destination or alternate aerodromes, or insufficiently planned for their aerodromes. So we really need to understand why that's happening, because as aviators, if we can understand why it's happening, we can then make sure that we're not going to fall into that trap as well. And I make this point, really often in a lot of the presentations I do. As pilots, we're not inventing new and crazy ways to get ourselves into trouble. If you look at the accident data, it seems to be the same things happening over and over again. Pretty sure it was James Reason that referred to that as being the awful sameness of aviation accidents. So human beings tend not to learn from other people's mistakes. We want to make sure that we do learn from other people's mistakes. So if we can chat about it, admit to ourselves that this sort of stuff's happening, then that's the first step in preventing it happening to us. So with a couple of case studies today, we're going to hopefully look at what's happening and then work out why it's happening. And I'll go out on a limb here and say that you're probably like me. When I first got into aviation, I didn't look at it and go, oh, gee, look at that person sitting down at the table going through reams of NOTAMs and MET, and before they go flying, oh, that's really for me. That's not the most exciting part of flying. That's not why most of us got into flying. But that process of planning, of gathering the information we need, is critical to a safe flight. It's not the most fun part, but it's an inconvenient truth that it has to be done. The quality of the decisions that you and I make, both pre-flight and airborne, will be directly related to the quality of information we're basing those decisions on. If we haven't gone to the trouble and the time to get that information, we're going to see things happen adversely in the air. And that's what we want to try and prevent. When I go around the countryside as an aviation safety advisor, I hear a lot of people say that they are confused by the NOTAM system. They say things like the volume of information they have to read for meteorology reports can be confusing. And there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that our knowledge in this area of accessing NOTAMs, weather, planning for our destination is lacking a bit. Personally, I think a lot of that comes down to the time that we plan. We've got to allocate the right amount of time to plan our flights. And I think that's one area where we're letting ourselves down. In one case, I was at an airfield and a professional pilot, a commercial pilot, told me that he never checks NOTAMs before he goes flying. I hope that's a bit shocking to you, because it was certainly shocking to me, and a very robust conversation followed that statement. But it just goes to show that in some cases, people have got to the point where they're just not doing it. And I don't think that's acceptable, and I'm sure you'll agree. So we need to understand what we need to do, how we need to do it, and acknowledge that we're humans. We can make mistakes. Our knowledge is perishable. We need to accept that and work out how we're going to get around that to make ourselves safer. Let me give you an example of the sort of things that we're seeing out there that we want to learn from. We don't want to point our finger at these pilots and say, gee, we'd never do that. These were good people trying to do the right thing, but it just went wrong for them. First case study happened on the east coast of Australia in 2021. So in this particular case, this pilot was planning to land on runway 05 at his destination airfield, and he actually accessed the NOTAMs and was going through them. But what he was doing was dismissing what he considered all non-relevant NOTAMs. So he's reading through them, looking for NOTAMs associated with the area he was flying in and runway 05 at his destination. When he got to his destination, as often happens, things changed, weather, fuel, etc. And he decided that he was going to, instead of land on runway 05, he would do a straight-in approach on runway 18. Now, unfortunately, when he was checking the NOTAMs, dismissing the NOTAMs that were not relevant to runway 05, he actually dismissed one that pointed out that runway 18 at this particular airfield was closed. So he's now on a straight-in approach to land on a closed runway that had been NOTAMed. Incidents like this have various layers to them. It's never, black and white. There was a couple other contributing factors about the markings at the airfield weren't quite compliant with showing that runway was closed, etc. But as it turned out, he landed on the runway. Thankfully, no damage to the aircraft or no injuries, but it could have obviously ended a lot worse than it did. So I think it's really important from that case study. We've seen what can go wrong if we don't check NOTAMs properly. It can really come back to bite us at an inopportune moment. But it's not just NOTAMs that are catching people out. As I mentioned before, weather's another one. When we pick our destination airfield or our potential alternate airfields and we're planning before we get airborne, we've got to access the weather. We've got to know what to expect so that our decisions are going to be good. How much fuel do we take? Should I even fly there in the first place, etc. So I've put a few questions up here for you. just have a quick look at those. And I haven't picked those randomly. These are questions that I have asked around the countryside at my seminars to various audiences, and these are questions that people have not been able to answer. So we've got licensed pilots that weren't able to answer these questions. In the case of the third one there, what does broken mean, BKN? I asked that one at an instructor seminar and I got the wrong answer. So I'm not trying to shame people here or anything like that. If you're looking at those 4 questions and you're getting them right, I think that's great. Good, fantastic. If you're looking at those 4 questions and you're starting to think, look, I can't get all of them or I can't get any of them, that's okay as well, as long as you acknowledge that and you remember that our knowledge is perishable, because if you hold a license, we all knew the answers to those questions at some point. But our knowledge is perishable. We need to acknowledge that and then work out, well, how am I going to deal with that? What am I going to do to make sure that my knowledge in the planning phase is up to speed? So let me put the answers up so you can check your knowledge and see how you've gone. Hopefully you got them all right. But as I said, if you didn't, that's okay. Just use it as an opportunity and a reminder that you've got some work to do on your procedures on how you're planning, how you're going to retain that information, or how you're going to quickly access that information if you need it. It's a really important part of the process. So based on that today, what we're seeing out there and some of the incidents that are still cropping up in our accident incident statistics, what did I want to do today? What did I want to chat with you about today? First of all, I did want to talk to you today and remind ourselves why planning is important. I know that sounds basic, but the fact is when we see the statistics, it's still happening. We want to list some resources available to help us plan. We can't go through all of them with the time we have, but I'll certainly cover some of them. We'll look at a couple of examples like URSA, for example. What sort of information are we getting out of URSA? Are you getting all the information out of URSA that you can? Because there's a whole bunch in there. And one I find that's not very well understood in a lot of cases, particularly in the sort of PPL, early CPL type field, is AWIS. So we'll have a quick word about AWIS so that a bit of a reminder for you what's available if you should need it. NOTAMs is a really big one. Okay, NOTAMs, as I mentioned, one of the most complained about things. You know, Craig, how do I go through all these NOTAMs? It's ridiculous, the number I've got to go through. I hear you, I understand you. I don't like going through them either, but I've yet to be able to think of a way that we can ensure that as a pilot, you're going to get only the NOTAMs that are applicable to your particular flight. Given all the variables, it's almost impossible to do. So I think at the moment, at least, it's the best system we've got. I know they're looking at improving it, but I think for the moment, the inconvenient truth is we will have a lot of NOTAMs to go through to make sure we're not missing anything for our flight. Also, if you hold a license, then at some point, you must have demonstrated competency in accessing NOTAMs and correctly interpreting them. So this is not a new requirement. Sometimes people sort of get very vocal as if, you know, this is a new thing that's popped up and, you know, we shouldn't have to do it. Well, that's not true. It's pretty much always been the case. But as I said, our procedures, our knowledge can be a bit perishable. We can get a bit complacent. So if you think that you're not going through NOTAMs to the level of detail that you should be, and we saw that in that first case study, this is a really good reminder to bring you back to standard and just say, you know what, no, it's not fun. I've just got to make sure I allocate the time and I've got to make sure that I go through all of those properly. A very simple thing that works for me is that I always make sure I've got a pen in my hand, I print the NOTAMs out, and I'm going to give them a tick or a cross. And I know that sounds simple and yeah, thanks Einstein, what a genius. But for me personally, it just means that I have to look at it to the detail where I have to decide, is it relevant or not? Cross. If it is, tick. I read it, make sure I understand it. The other thing is when I'm airborne, should I have to divert to that field that I've been checking NOTAMs for, I can quickly pull out the NOTAMs and I know the ones with the tick next to are the ones that I need to have another look at just to refresh my memory. So if you haven't got something like that, some little process in place when you're reading your NOTAMs, please do it, because not reading the NOTAMs can have catastrophic consequences, and we have seen that. Second case study shows us another example of what can go wrong if we ignore things like NOTAMs or don't properly interpret them. This was on the east coast of Australia in 2014, and in this case, it's an instructor and a student. They're on a practice navigation exercise. During that flight, the instructor decides, okay, I'll give the student a practice diversion, gives him a field, and basically gets the student to fly to that field, and they do a approach into that field. They land, and it's only after they land, they notice that there's some people around the runway area that aren't normally there, and things are looking a bit unusual. That airfield had actually been NOTAMed as closed, the whole airfield. They were having a model jet aircraft group event there. Luckily, the coordinator for the Model Aero Club event saw the aircraft coming into land, managed to clear 3 jet models that were airborne at the time out of the way, and also get personnel off the runway as well that the aircraft was landing on. Could have ended catastrophically. Thankfully, got away with it in this case, no injuries, no damage. But a simple missed NOTAM in that instance could have created a really, really a bad and catastrophic event. So to speak a bit more about this, we're lucky to be joined by Ian Warburton. As I said, Ian has just basically retired from the Air Force after 55 years service, mostly as a pilot. And he also just ran the 2025 Outback Air Race as the flight manager. So he's got a lot of good information, and really looking forward to hearing from him. So I'll pass it over to you, Ian.
Thanks, Peter, and g'day everyone. And hello to also a number of my friends who are listening in today, and especially a few of them who were actually on the air race with me as well. G'day, and I guess you'll be keeping me honest during the question time. Okay, this is a picture of our crew at the start of the race at Ayers Rock. And you can see we take up a fair bit of space on any airfield that we go to. It's a fairly complex planning exercise to get 37 aircraft around the Outback Air Race route, and there's an awful lot in it. I hope you find it interesting what I'll tell you about how we plan that, and I hope you'll be able to pick up just a few things. Like no one will need to plan, or very few people will need to plan an exercise like this. But there's plenty of stuff in the planning that we do for this air race that is applicable to just one aircraft heading out on a lengthy trip somewhere. So, Peter, if you could give us the next slide, thanks. So, quick one on what is the Outback Air Race. So it's a fundraising exercise for the Royal Flying Doctor Service, and it's held every 3 years. And just a bit of an advertisement and a bit of a brag. This year, the event raised a record $1 million for the Flying Doctor Service, and all of us that were involved are pretty proud and happy about that. We beat the record from the last race by $250,000. So it was a great effort that everyone's really happy about. And so the air race is it's a navigation and time trial through the Australian Outback. This year we had 37 aircraft and about 100 team members in those aircraft travelling around the place. And if you can throw up the next slide, please, Peter, to give you an idea where we went. Here's our race route. And you can see that's a fairly big chunk of Australia that we travelled over. It was a couple of weeks to get around there. Some interesting points about the race. It's an Outback Air Race, but there was only one strip that actually wasn't a SEAL strip. That was Exmouth. There were 2 of the strips that we went into where we overnighted that didn't have fuel. 2 really long legs where some of the aircraft were required to have an intermediate fuel stop. And majority of the strips that we went into, the parking is either on the grass or in gravel. So all of those points that I've mentioned there, they all have implications for planning this this event. Okay, next slide. Thanks, Peter. So I'm going to, I could talk for a couple of hours about how we planned this thing. There is so much involved, so many moving parts. But today I'm just going to try and cover some key points. If there's stuff I haven't covered that you want to know about, we have a question period at the end. And you can ask me there. But this is my framework that I'm going to use for the presentation. So first of all, we'll look at what are the planning considerations. What are all the things we need to worry about? Thanks, Jason. And we look at those and then we go, all right, how do we deal with that? So the preparation and planning is the next part. And I've broken that down into 3 areas: education, risk management, and the coordination with all the agencies we have to deal with to make this thing work. Then at the end of that, just a couple of random points, which is kind of handy information that I discovered as I was going through the planning. So next slide, thanks, Peter. So here's a picture of the boys and girls, our boys and girls, with the tower guys at Broome, who are absolutely brilliant, and they organised for us to visits to the tower. And can I just say, if you ever, as a pilot, if you're ever invited to go to the tower, do not knock it back. It's an absolutely worthwhile exercise, and this was a great thing that the guys at Broome Tower did for our crew that flew through there. All right. What are the planning considerations we had? Here's some of the key ones. So aircraft types and performance. We had a wide range of aircraft types, and their performance varied significantly. So a cruise TAS, the slowest aircraft is 95 knots, the fastest was 180. So there's quite a difference between that. So there's implications there for how you maintain the separation between all those aircraft. Pilot experience, we had such a wide range of experience there. The lowest time pilots had less than 200 hours. Highest time was up around 23,000, and a whole bunch of in-betweens from 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 hours, and a lot that were under 1,000, but between 500 and 1,000. So quite a difference in pilot experience, but also in the pilot experience area. Regardless of the hours that people had, there was a wide range of experience with Outback flying, wide range of experience with regards to familiarity with controlled airspace procedures as well. So that is a real planning consideration. How do we make sure that people are comfortable with different things that they're not really familiar with? And that comes down to education. We'll talk about education in a little while. Airfield suitability. So we're kind of lucky. You can say, as a rule of thumb, if an airfield has a sealed runway, it's almost certain that a modern GA aircraft can use it without any problems, and that's pretty much true. So we look at runway surface and length. As I said, only one airfield wasn't a sealed runway, and the lengths, the shortest runway was 4,100 feet. So that's pretty easy for GA aircraft. That shouldn't be a challenge for any of our GA aircraft. But there's another consideration there, and that's airfield elevation. And so we had a couple of airfields. So Alice Springs is just under 1,800 feet. Airfield elevation. So on a hot day, what's the density altitude there? Is that going to make a difference? So something worth thinking about. The runway length, you need to consider the airfield elevation as well to work out what your performance is going to be. So fortunately for us, all the higher elevation airfields, so Ayers Rock, Alice Springs and Tennant Creek, all had long runways. So Alice is 8,000 feet, Ayers Rock's 8,500 feet. So there really were no issues density altitude wise for our aircraft, but something that you need to think about. The other thing is we've got to find parking for 37 aircraft wherever we go. And that's for a couple of the airfields, that was a real problem. It got sorted, which is good. And we're also thinking about fuel availability. The next thing we've got to think about is there's a whole bunch of different airspace types that surround the airfields we're going to. So we had one military control zone, that's Tyndall, 2 Class D airfields, that's Broome and Alice Springs, 1 airfield with an AFIS. What's an AFIS? In fact, there is only 1 airfield in Australia that has an AFIS. And what is that? 2 airfields with broadcast areas. They're actually a mandatory broadcast area. What's a mandatory broadcast area? In Australia, there are 3 airfields that have mandatory broadcast areas. We flew through 2 of those. And they are Ayers Rock and Port Hedland. And one airfield with a certified air ground radio service, that's at Ayers Rock. I'm not sure how many of them are in Australia, but they're pretty rare. And then last but not least, we have the plain vanilla uncontrolled airfields by 7. So when you look at that and think about that from a planning perspective, I sort of went, well, how many people on this race are absolutely up to speed with the procedures in all of those different types of airspace? And I reckon I can say fairly confidently, no one. So we need to make sure that everyone on the race is familiar with that. So that's a planning consideration as well. So just in case you're wondering, where do you find out information about these things? So mandatory broadcast areas, here's your clue, page 366 and page 367 of the VFR guide. Certified air ground radios services, page 370, and AFIS, the 1 AFIS, page 192 of the VFR guide. If you're interested in looking up that and finding out what all these weird things are, probably most people don't deal with those sort of things regularly. Okay, another planning consideration, weather. That's really easy, isn't it? Because Northern Australia, August, September is the best time of year to fly there. No problems, it's always fine and beautiful. Okay, well, we'll explore that a little bit later. And we have unique race requirements. So during the race, it's a navigation trial. So there are 2 gates which everyone must fly over. That's the navigation thing. They must hit those gates as accurately as they can. The gate out is near the departure airfield, gate in near the arrival airfield, and all of those aircraft are getting as close as possible to those points as they can. So every aircraft is passing through those. And we also already mentioned that the performance characteristics of the aircraft, it's a planning consideration. Well, how do we make sure we don't come together when we're going through those gates? And we also need to we've got 37 aircraft. We want to get them out of the airfield in a timely manner. How do we do that? How do we plan that? That's an important planning consideration. The other thing is, when we go into an airfield, we've got 37 aircraft. We're going to have a real impact on local operators, like if there's a charter operator, flying school, whatever, we're going to impact their operations. So we need to make sure that, we inconvenience those people as little as possible. And when I talk about local operators, as it says there, that also includes the air traffic controllers and the AFIS operator, the certified air ground radio operator as well. And let me tell you, those guys work pretty hard when they've got 37 aircraft coming in at about 5 to 10 minute intervals. It's hard work, and they do a magnificent job. And my hat's off to them. They accept it and just go, yeah, well, we'll do that, and we'll do the best we can. And they do a brilliant job. So there's lots of other planning considerations as well. I'm not going to go too much into them, but you can probably think of more than these, but things like fatigue, medical issues, maintenance issues, those sorts of things that people have. I'm not going to talk about those, but if you have a question about them later on, we could probably go through that. Okay, next slide, please, Peter. So education. One of the ways we educated people, got them up to speed with things that they needed to know, was through chinwags. So we had, in the 8 months prior to the race start, we have 6 Teams meetings. And at those meetings, we have subject matter experts who provide briefings on important topics. So we had an RFDS pilot, local to a WA RFDS pilot, who gave us a lot of a briefing on lots of local knowledge about the places we were flying through, not stuff about traffic, airfields, other operators, that sort of thing. Really useful stuff. And of course, we had CASA involved as well. Thanks, Peter. And Peter gave us a presentation on flying in the Outback. We also had a brief from the Bureau of Meteorology. Now, this is really good because I said, it's really easy, Northern Australia. Well, kind of. So the weather guy briefed us on by route segment and sort of gave us the what you might expect through each route segment, and pretty much the weather at this time of year, it's clear and fine. You get a lot of convective turbulence, and you can get smoke haze and dust. That's the thing, and we found that absolutely. But the other thing which really made me perk up was the northwest cloud bands, which can occur during this time of the year. And these are widespread rain and low cloud that right across the northwest of Australia, and they can persist for a couple of days. And in the aftermath of their passing are beautiful conditions for the formation of fog as well. So this is a real consideration, and we're kind of stuck if we were to experience one of these northwest cloud bands. It has a real impact on the race, and it could mean a delay or cancelling the race leg for a day, and all the implications that has logistically for accommodation, both in the place we're at and the place we're going to, and fuel and airfields and all that sort of stuff. So it's a real worry, but we were aware of it, that could happen, and not much you can do about it except tough it out if it does happen, and take the hit logistically with what might happen if that were to occur. So, and the other person was the flight manager who spoke about how to prepare your aircraft, what survival equipment to take, some tips on packing gear, tools, stuff like that. But also talking about the race rules and how they are important safety consideration, risk consideration for maintaining good separation between all the aircraft, and that stuff is contained in the flight manager's guide. Okay, next one. Thanks, Peter. So risk management. This is just such a huge area for us in the planning because it is all about risk. This event has a whole bunch of risks that you don't find if you're in a typical one aircraft going somewhere. We have a whole bunch of other risks because we are a bunch of aircraft all traveling together, all going through the same spots on our legs and so on. So there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong. And so we do some pretty comprehensive risk planning, and that's supported by a professional risk management firm. So we produce a whole bunch of documents which inform the way we do business. So you can see some of the stuff there. There's a air race safety plan. There's a flight manager's guide and the supplement. I write that myself, but it figures as in a lot of the documentation as an important risk control for what we're doing there. So we've got the risk management plan, the incident management plan, accident incident procedures. So a lot of these documents are kind of just for the committee members on how they deal with incidents and stuff like that. But we've also got there the pilot declaration form. This is an interesting one because everyone's required to sign the form to say that yes, they've got a current medical, they've got a proper license, blah blah blah. But they also fill out what their experience is. That's how I know that there's those people with those number of hours and how many people are familiar with controlled airspace procedures and outback flying and stuff like that. So that's where I get that information from. And the other important one there is the aircraft information form. And that has all the details that you might normally see in a flight plan, and that goes to the Joint Rescue Coordination Centre. The reason for that is we maintain our own SAR, and so if we have an issue with an aircraft that doesn't turn up, we can go straight to the JRCC and say, it's this aircraft. They've got all the information on that aircraft and they can start their search. Next slide. Thanks, Peter. So the other part of the risk management stuff is we do amongst the key members of the committee, a desktop exercise in emergency planning. And one of the reasons why we do this is because this actually happened in 2015. An aircraft actually did a ground loop on the runway, closed the runway, and so that's a major risk concern. And so we had an exercise. You can see there. That was the scenario that we put up: aircraft crash on daily waters, a whole bunch of stuff there. I'll let you read that. But basically, we work through this exercise and we document the things that we come up with. So we've got a really good outline of how to deal with something like this. And so it means that we've thought it through beforehand. So if we ever have to have an issue like this, we're well placed to deal with it. And next slide, thanks, Peter. All right, who do we deal with? Well, there's a lot of people we have to deal with who helps out and make this thing happen. That photo there is Tyndall, by the way, and it's undergoing some major works. And we had some major issues getting in there, getting parking there, and all sorts of stuff. But fortunately, we had some good people in the Air Force who helped us out, air traffickers and the base aviation safety officer, and sorted out all our problems there. But can I just say, all the people we've dealt with there were brilliant. They were super cooperative, super helpful, and it was a real pleasure to deal with them all because they were keen to help, and they gave us some brilliant help. So the head office in Air Service. Oh, sorry, I'll start with CASA. So we put out a NOTAM. It's a Melbourne and Brisbane FIR NOTAM detailing what the air race is doing. We also, and CASA has to be the originator because we can't originate NOTAM. So CASA is looking after that for us. We also put out an AIP sub detailing what's going on with the race. So that's available, and the guys in the head office at Air Services, they help us do that. We also had air race call signs. They had to go through a committee process to get that change approved and so on. And all of the local procedures at Alice Springs, Broome, Port Hedland and Ayers Rock, we dealt with the local tower, and we worked out what they were happy with and what their local procedures were. And from that, we agreed this is how we're going to get everyone in and out of this place. And we put that information in the Flight Manager's Guide supplement, and I'll show you that shortly. But I'll just talk quickly about the Joint Rescue Coordination Centre. So I actually visited the JRCC and gave them all the information on that, and got a good rundown of the stuff. And from that, I got some really handy information that isn't kind of well known, but I'll share that with you shortly. So the other stuff, the AROs and the fuel providers, that's done by the committee members who are the location coordinators. So I didn't have much to do with that. But anyway, so the local procedures, this is all part of the education process, getting everyone up to speed. So Peter, if you can just throw up the next slide. So this is the flight, an extract from the Flight Manager's Guide supplement. So I don't know if you can see that. I can see it okay. So this is kind of typical of the information we put in there. You can see there, that's the information for the arrival at Alice Springs. So it tells everyone, these are the tracks you fly, the heights you fly, when you got a call, what you got to say, what tower's going to say back to you. All that sort of stuff is in there. So everyone knows this is how we do it. This is how we get in and out. So for the people who are unfamiliar with the procedures, they can study this beforehand, and they've also got it in the cockpit with them to refer to when they go in. So it makes it a whole lot easier for them and also for the tower, because the people that are calling them are all saying the same things, and it's all expected by the tower. So that's the one of the booklets we produce. So that's pretty much all I've got to say about the planning. So random bits of information. So Peter, this is the first one. I'm just going to put this up here and leave that and let you read that. And of course, once you've read that, I'll move on to a serious random bit of information and talk about the Joint Rescue Coordination Centre. Here it is. This is the Joint Rescue Coordination Centre. It's in Canberra. These guys have some amazing technology for coordinating searches and rescues for maritime and aviation assets or people that are lost or likewise. And so while I was there, I got some really good briefings, and they gave me some info, which I went, why isn't that more widely known? So if you jump on the next slide there, thanks, Peter. So tips from the JRCC: if you've got a PLB, if it's registered with AMSA, you'll have a login. A couple of things that are really important for you to do is, if with that PLB, associate it with an aircraft, and you can see the screenshots there. You just go and edit your thing, and you can see associated with this beacon. So if you don't associate your PLB with an aircraft, if it's activated, the JRCC will get that and go, oh, it's some bushwalker or it's some guy in a four-wheel drive. We'll hand it off to the local police. So you'll have the local police looking after you. And how good are they at that? I don't know. It might be variable. If your PLB is associated with an aircraft, JRCC gets it and goes, this is an aircraft search. You've got experts in that field looking for your aircraft. The other thing you can do is add trips associated with this beacon. So if you're going for a lengthy trip somewhere, just like we did with the air race, so for my on mine, and you can see the one I actually did, it's on there, it's kind of hard to read. So I just said, this is where I'm going, these are the dates, I'm in the air race. And so that's there as well. So if you activate your beacon for like a real thing, you are giving the JRCC a great head start in searching for you, because one, they know you're an aircraft, and two, if you've filled out the trip associated with the aircraft, you've given them a whole lot of information that is useful to them to start doing the search. So just jump in there, have a look at that, and do those things. It will really help you when you need the JRCC. The other thing is, with your ADSB, now I'd be surprised if people are turning them off regularly, but never turn it off, because if JRCC are searching for you, one of the tools they'll use is they can acquire a complete ADSB track of you anywhere and they can do that through the Aerion satellite data. That's the website there. They can find out where you were. They showed me there was an accident some months before I went to visit them, where the guy was lost. He actually crashed down in the snowies, and they got that data and went, that's where his ADSB stopped transmitting. They went, that's where we'll start our search, and they found the aircraft 400 meters from where that was. So really super useful tool for a search. So don't ever turn your ADSB off. Okay, that's all I got. Peter, I really shortened that presentation for my practice. Here's my last slide. Not a technically good photograph, but I love it. It's just so cool. It's all our team at Broome and a beautiful sunset in WA. Life's good.
Thanks so much for that, mate. We really appreciate you giving up your time to talk to us today, and just and congratulations on the fundraising for the RFDS as well. What a great thing to do. Some brilliant points there Ian made about the type of information we need to plan, and I'll highlight what he said there. It doesn't matter if you're planning for a big group of aircraft or a single aircraft. The key information needs to be accessed to make that safe. The other great thing I want to highlight that Ian said was planning for the what ifs. In their case, what if an aircraft crashes on the runway and the runway is blocked? We can't cover every what if before we go flying, but we should cover some major ones. So what I'm going to do is just quickly go through the resources. You'll be able to go back and look at the video. If you miss these, it's too quick, but these will be the stuff that I'm sending you the link to. There's a CASA Out and Back video series that covers all sorts of topics, including planning. I'm going to send you the link to that. On one of those pages, you can watch the videos. On one of those pages, there's a link to an air services publication that outlines your responsibilities for obtaining information in flight. I'll also send you the link to the Bureau of Meteorology Aviation Weather page. If you haven't got that on your favourites, please put it there. I'm sure most of you will be familiar with this one, but if you hit that button, you'll get an accept clause just saying that, yep, I'll use air services data for the planning, usually from NAPES. The weather bomb site is really just for general information. That's the page you get to. It's brilliant. That's the menu, and if I expand that out, so much good information in there. If you've never been in there or haven't been on there for a while, please take the time to go and have a look. You wouldn't believe how much quality information is there. You can get warnings for particular airfields. If you're going to that particular airfield, that's real-time information. You can get an example of, an actual warning in that case for East Sail. Other things we can get off that menu, the Knowledge Centre. If you remember nothing else of what I say today, remember this. The BOM Knowledge Centre is brilliant. If you go to product information, you'll get the whole range of information. It's unbelievable. So referring back to the quiz we did at the beginning of the presentation, if you struggled with that, there's some decode cards on that page that you can print out. I print them out, keep them in my flight bag, and I can actually use them when I'm looking at the weather to decode any codes that I've forgotten and aren't familiar with. So great information there off that page. Other things you can find are some airport hazards and some really good information if you're going to those particular airfields. URSA we talked about, so much good information. AvFax codes, Ian mentioned the airfield elevation being an important factor. We can get whether there's an AWIS there and the MET services and little gems that might be buried. If you look at this one's from Hamilton Island, but it mentions in the additional information that there's a bit of a hazard with turbulence in certain wind conditions. That's really good information for us to know if we're going to that field and we're not familiar with it. So take the time to go through all the information you have. If there's an automatic weather service, that's what one looks like in the hardware side of things, and you're not familiar with using it, if you go back to the knowledge page, to that reference material page, and there's a section there with a little sheet that explains exactly what we can get off an AWIS service, including an example, all of the information and the like. So just a whole bunch of good information on that one that I really recommend to you. What we wanted to do today was remind ourselves of why planning is important. We wanted to give you some resources that you can use to help plan. Have a look at URSA very quickly and just to remind ourselves of the quality and volume information that's available, and also just remind you what an AWIS does and what we can use that for and the information we can get. Really fantastic hearing from our guest speaker, not only from a planning point of view, but just the interest of the race itself. So a couple of church notices to finish off. If you have a close call, a personal experience, we love to include that in our safety material so other pilots can learn from it, particularly if you've had something to do with a non-controlled operation, aerodrome operation, weather and forecasting, flight planning, or a controlled aerodrome operation. We'd love to hear from you. And I believe if they publish it, you get $500, so that's pretty good. ADSB, we've extended the ADSB rebate until 2027. That's where you can apply to get a grant of up to 50% of the cost for purchase and install of an ADSB on your aircraft. And we've put out this sheet that explains what would probably be the best one for you, given your aircraft and where you're flying. So have a look for that one. Flight Safety Magazine, you might have a wedding anniversary or something coming up. Imagine getting this for the other half, how thrilled they'd be. 50% discount from your Flight Safety Magazine subscription. There's a user code there, FSA502026. If you use that code, you'll get 50% off the subscription. And I hope you can join us for our next webinar. Next webinar is going to be on the 18th of November. My colleague Chase is running that one, and sticking with the runway and the airfield and runway theme, he's going to be looking at runway performance. So I certainly hope you can join us for that one. So thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate that. I know it's a busy flying time of year, so really happy that you gave us some of your valuable time today. Hope you got something out of that. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We will hang around for a little bit to answer them, but if not, feel free to email us at any time and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions. Thanks again. Safe flying.